I am also going to just share as a reminder where this is located. So if you missed the first two, would love for you to go back and watch those. So the first one was the introduction to disabilities. The second one was making simple accommodations. And then today, Darcy's going to cover these really cool kits that just got dropped off in my office, and we'll get those out to you guys at spring training. And they are full of just such really neat stuff. And I'm excited to hear from Darcy to talk about it. So Darcy, you can go ahead and let me make sure you're a host here and take it away.
Okay. I cannot share right now, so if you just want to get me that, then we'll be good.
There you go. You should be good.
All right. Okay. So now, hopefully, you are seeing some slides. Looks like you should be. All right. So this morning, as Leanne mentioned, we are going to talk a little bit more about these accommodation kits. Your state has a handful of those that you'll be able to utilize for programming. Here in Minnesota, how we've done that is each of our county and regional offices have received one of these kits. And then we have a lot of clubs and counties that are also budgeting some dollars to create either a full kit like this or a mini kit with some of the things that they think would be most valuable for their program. So my name is Darcy Cole and I work here in Minnesota, so not super far away. My official role is 4-H program operations educator, and I support the southern half of Minnesota in relation to all the things people maybe don't always love about their job. So like finances, risk management, contracts, agreements, insurance, all those kind of things, but that I like, obviously. I have been with Minnesota Extension for just shy of 18 years. It'll be that in just a couple months here. So I've worked in both the local county role and also in the regional role. So I kind of bring both of those experiences. I also bring that personal lived experience as well. I have 4 kids and my oldest 2 both have autism, very different ends of the spectrum. So I bring kind of that parent hat when I do some of this work as well. So, so like I said, we're gonna just walk through what's in the kits. I'll show you each of the things that's there. We'll talk about why we use it, how we use it, just so that way, hopefully by actually seeing it, you'll be more likely to actually utilize it within your programming. All right, so the purpose of these kits is really, we had a grant through the Department of Human Resources here in Minnesota. We wanted to create some support tools so that groups were able to really feel like they were equipped and hopefully fairly comfortable in providing some simple accommodations to our 4-Hers in our program. So really the purpose of those kits is to support creating inclusive environments that are supportive learning environments for everyone in the room, right? Some of the tools, and you're going to hear me talk about this throughout, like we might, and I shared this with our accommodations one last time too, is like we might put an accommodation or provide an accommodation tool for 1 or 2 kids that maybe someone asked for one for. However, many of the things I'm going to show you today are things that are going to benefit everyone in the room, whether or not they have a diagnosed disability. And the other piece to remember is that not everyone tells us that their young person has a disability and needs accommodation. So sometimes we just don't have that information. They're not disclosing that. So by providing tools and just having them accessible to everyone, people can utilize them, whether or not they've asked to utilize them. And the other purpose is really, we want to just make sure that our 4-H programs are equipped to be able to provide those simple accommodations. And many staff, if we said, hey, go make an accommodations kit or get some accommodation materials, they would have no idea where to start because they're not living in this world, which, you know, good or bad, right? That's the world I live in. So that's really the purpose, is to make sure that we're able to be supportive and that staff and volunteers have what they need to do that. So how we use this kit, or how I would recommend that these kits are used, is really to just make them available, right? So have the items available wherever you have your other supplies, or at a check-in table if people are grabbing materials there, or registration materials. So that way people can pick and choose if they want to utilize these materials or not. And really it's about making them readily accessible. So we don't want someone to necessarily have to ask for an accommodation. If we can really just make those materials just there as part of our programming automatically, people can just grab the things that are going to be most valuable and useful to them. You can see there on side of the slide here, there's a link and a picture there to our accommodation kit information sheet. And that's something that I will share in the follow-up email as well. And really that sheet talks through why we use these, how we use these, and talks through each of the items that is in the kit, and explains like how you would use it and what the purpose is. Because some of the things I'm going to show you, like if you picked it up, it's really self-explanatory. Other things you might be like, I don't really know how I would use that without actually like having someone explain or show that to me. So that's kind of what this support document is for. There's a couple pages that just describe everything, and then there's a couple pages of pictures that actually show you what everything is. And like I said, we'll walk through each of the things, and then you will get a link to this after the training. And then if you do utilize one of the kits there in North Dakota, there is a copy of like a laminated copy of that information sheet in each of the kits. So like you don't have to remember to print one off when you use it. It's just there automatically, so that if you need to reference it or a volunteer needs to reference it, they have it easily accessible. All right, so when we look at the kit contents, there's really like three, what I would say, major categories of items that are in there. One of those are things that are related to sensory. So there's some sensory fidgets, some things that really help people to regulate some of that. There's also some support tools for people who have fine motor difficulties, because that is fairly common with people with disabilities, that it might be a little more challenging to do things like cut or write or whatever it might be, that we a lot of times automatically just like assume that everyone can do in our programs. So again, those are in there to kind of help provide those supports. And then there's some other things that are there to support some of like the visual support needs, and help people be able to focus and understand the content that we're trying to present to them. So that's the three main categories of the items that are in there. And we'll talk through each of those here during our webinar today. So all right, so, and I'm going to show you each of these things so that you can actually, like I said, see what they are, see how to use them, so that you're hopefully likely to actually utilize it. So in each of the kits, there is a box of just a wide variety of fidgets that people can pick and choose. So this is what that looks like in your box, or there in your bag. And there's just a wide variety of things. There's these pop ones that are a pretty common thing that a lot of us might have already, like as their sensory tool or sometimes a toy, right? And the thing to note when we are using fidgets for our work, we're using them as a tool. They're not a toy, right? They're not there to entertain someone during a meeting because they're bored listening to you, right? Our sensory fidgets are there for someone to be able to utilize, so that then they feel like they can focus on what we're trying to present to them or what we're trying to do with the group, because they have something to keep their hands busy, which automatically helps them just get out some of that extra pent up energy that they have. So like, so there's some pop ones in there. There's also like some just like kind of squeezy balls in there too, that people can utilize with those. This is one of my favorite ones. There's like these tangle fidgets. I don't know if you've seen these. They have these in lots of varieties, so you just kind of can manipulate those. There are, just like I said, lots of little things that people can utilize to like get a little bit of energy out in a quiet, focused, acceptable way. And how we would recommend that you would utilize these would be, if you're having a meeting or you're doing a program, just put these out on the table, right? Like before people are there, just have them on the tables. People can utilize them. Depending on your audience, you may need to set some ground rules when we talk about fidgets. So you might need to talk about what does appropriate fidget use look like? And I can share some different ideas too with you in the follow-up, so you kind of have them written out. But you might want to talk about like what's acceptable use of the fidget, right? And reminding them like they're not toys, they're not there to entertain you, right? They're there to help you get some of those sensory needs out. You also might want to set some ground rules around like, when do we utilize them? Like, do we utilize them the whole time? Do we utilize them at certain parts during our time together? You also may want to think about like, what does it look like, you know, if you're going to keep them in a central location, like what are people responsible for? Are you responsible for finding the one you want and then returning it afterwards? Or is the expectation that they're going to be on the table and you just leave them there, right? Another ground rule, which sounds obvious, but you might want to like talk about or share, is that like the sensory fidgets stay there, right? Like they're not something to take home with you, even though they might be really cool. We want to make sure that we have them there for future time. And then also talk about like making sure that we're meeting our needs without distracting others, right? So if we're doing a sensory fidget, we're going to use that in our space. We're not going to be like showing other people or putting it in their space, right? We're going to make sure that we're using it to meet our own needs and not using it as a distractor for everybody else that's in the room. And those who maybe are sitting next to somebody using a fidget, again, like they need to be responsible for their behavior and making sure that they aren't being distracted by the fidget use next to them, right? Like they need to be able to focus on what's happening. So those are some examples of ground rules that you may want to set when you're using these. And it might be like you as a group kind of using that process of like developing group agreements, like you might talk about as a group and kind of say, okay, what are some guidelines or rules we want to have when we use fidgets? And you might use that as a way for the group to develop their own rules together. Or you might, depending upon your audience and like capability to do that, you might set those ground rules and you may like have them posted or you may talk about them. So that way everybody is on the same understanding of how we're going to use them. So they're just kind of like some key takeaways with fidgets. Another example of a fidget is a chair band, which this is probably one that if you saw it in the kit, you wouldn't know what to do with this without a picture because it just looks like bigger band, or you might think like this is exercise band. What are we doing with this, right? So that's why there's a picture in the kit that shows you how to actually use it. So what it does is this goes on the front legs of a chair. And the purpose of this is then someone can like kick and fidget their feet in this band so that they're providing them, again, a chance to get out some of that pent up energy in a pretty quiet way, right? So they make a little bit of noise, like potentially, right? But they're actually super quiet. So another way, again, for someone to be able to do that. One thing to note, like these take sometimes a little bit of work depending on the legs, like or like the width of your chair. So it's probably not something that a younger 4-H'er is going to be able to put on. Like you're probably going to have to help them put that on the chair. So just note that as you come. But again, just another way, again, for someone to be able to get out a little bit of that pent up energy without it becoming a distraction in your group environment. And then the last one I want to show you this is a pencil topper. Gosh, I hate when you're like, which way do I have to move my hands, right, to get it so that it's moving the way I think it is. This just fits on the top of the eraser on a pencil and someone can fidget it and it moves up and down. It's kind of like a screw. And really like there's two cool things about this. One, like it's a really quiet fidget that someone can utilize and manipulate while you're in your program. The other neat part about this is sometimes kids might like to chew on a pencil eraser and like the metal part, and that's with or without a disability, right? Like, because they're kids, right? And they just do that. So like both of my older two, like they will chew up every pencil eraser and every like metal on the pencil unless there's something there to stop them from doing that. And first of all, like that's a safety hazard, right? We don't want someone chewing the metal part off of a pencil and ending up cutting their mouth. Also not something we probably want to eat. So by sticking this on the end of the pencil, they also can't chew that part of the pencil because it's completely covered. So like they can chew this if they want. It's plastic, right? It's not gonna, it's pretty hard plastic, so it's not gonna like break when they do that. So it covers up like that safety hazard, but it also, again, provides something for somebody to keep their fingers busy with during your session. So those are some examples of fidgets. I would love to hear from any of you in the chat, or if you're comfortable and want to unmute, if there are other fidgets that maybe you've utilized personally, professionally, that have been a successful tool in your lives. And I'll give you just a second, like I said, if you want to throw something in the chat or you want to unmute, that's also cool. Okay, I'm not hearing anything. Like I said, if you have some things, throw them in the chat as we go. Some other sensory things that you might want to potentially include in there, but I haven't included. And part of it is like, they're things that, like these are pretty easy to throw in a bucket of bleach if you need to clean them, you know, between programming. But some of the things are a little harder. So some other things that you might want to potentially utilize is some sensory things might be like a set of like earmuffs, right? So that you can help someone to kind of tone down some of the background loudness of a session. Some kids with autism spectrum disorder, that's really beneficial for them. Those kids, I would assume and hope that many times they need that, they're bringing them themselves, right? Because we probably don't want to like be sharing like earmuffs without being able to clean them between, right? We don't want to spread any head lice or anything else crazy through doing that. So that's why those aren't in there. Some people also might utilize earplugs for your
And
program.
is it just my computer that froze?
No, mine froze too. I think you're back, Darcy.
Okay.
It froze for a little bit. Thanks,
Okay.
Dustin.
Well, hopefully you caught most of what I was saying. So I was saying some additional things you may want to include that I haven't included is things like sunglasses, right? To help with those bright lights. Earplugs or headphones are other tools that you could potentially utilize. You know, if you're using those, obviously you need to make sure that you have something to sanitize between users because we don't want to be spreading head lice or something like that. So that's why those aren't in there because they take a little bit maybe more work from you. So those are some other ideas of sensory things that you might potentially include depending upon your group. If somebody is using earmuffs, they're probably bringing them with many times because they know that they have that need. So that's part of the reason they're not there too. All right, so fine motor supports. These are some kind of fun things I'm going to show you. So fine motor supports, some examples are things like pencil grips, and you have a bunch of different ones in there because different people may prefer different ones. So, and some of these are probably like pencil grips you've never seen before. So like this one, they just grip it and it gives them a little bit different grip. This one, like they stick their fingers in like the holes and it just helps them to hold the pencil a little bit better. So there's a wide variety of those in there. Again, like just have them available. And then if somebody wants to utilize them, they can throw them on a pencil at your program or you can help them throw it on there. And these are things that again, like are useful for somebody with disability, but also someone who maybe is just developing those writing skills can be helpful for, or somebody who just wants to have a more comfortable writing experience, they may choose to have those. So there's a bunch of those in there. One of my favorite tools, and I think I'm going to do my best to show you this here. So this is a mounted scissors, and this is probably something that you maybe have never seen before. So this is pretty cool because you would put this on your tabletop, and then this is something that someone can do on their own, or they could do with assistance. So like they could do this as a two-person thing. So what they do is you stick your sheet of paper into the front of your piece, because you maybe can't tell, but there's like a scissors part here. So you stick it in there and then you utilize the other hand to like push down and it cuts your paper. And then you can like turn it and move it around. So the way that you would use this yourself is like you would have a surface, you have the paper, and then somebody could cut, right? And they can move around their paper as they're doing it. If they're doing this with someone assisting them, like one person can do the cutting part and the other person can like move the paper around and direct where they're cutting. So there's a wide variety of uses for this. And like I said, it's a really cool tool and it's really helpful for someone who maybe doesn't have the hand strength to be able to like squeeze the scissors or the coordination to like squeeze the scissors and move this paper around at the same time, where this like stays in one place for them to do that. The other part that can be challenging for someone with the scissors is like being able to control how open and close that scissors goes can be really hard for, first of all, someone who has small hands, right? Let alone someone who maybe doesn't have a ton of hand strength. So having either like this mounted scissors or the loop scissors I'm going to show you is really helpful for that because they can only open the scissors so far, right? And it's easier for them to be able to like keep in their hand. So loop scissors is kind of similar with this. Again, like the key part with this is they use it like a regular scissors, but it can only open so far, right? And the fact that it's a loop, it actually like helps you to be able to open and close it a little bit easier. So it doesn't take quite as much hand strength to be able to utilize that. So those are, like I said, a couple of resources that are good for supporting somebody who might have difficulty with cutting, which isn't necessarily the easiest skill for someone to do anyway. The next like 3 things you see across the middle row are kind of similar in concept of why you would use these. So these are all like, and you can't probably tell super well. You can probably maybe tell a little bit. So they're 3-sided, so like triangle shaped markers, pencils, crayons. And the reason that these are helpful is because holding a regular pencil, scissors, crayon can be difficult for someone to do. These, because they are triangular shape, like you don't need necessarily like pencil grip many times because it already is like more conducive to like helping you hold it in your hand the right way. And again, like it's not moving around in your hand. So you use them the same way. So if you're using, like I said, pencils, markers, crayons, have those round shaped ones on the table like you normally would, but also just throw these on the table. And people can utilize these if they feel like it's going to be beneficial to them. And we've had, kids that maybe haven't quote unquote needed to use them, but have chose to use them. And they found that they're a lot easier for them to write and use. So, and again, that kind of helps to reduce the need for some of those pencil grips sometimes because it just fits in their hand better. Another cool example is this grip tape. And this, I wish like you could feel it while I'm talking about it, but this like the backside is like, and you kind of maybe hear it when I figure it's like sandpaper, right? So, so what this does is it allows you to put this on a surface, and someone can grip it and their hand doesn't slide off. So think about like a door handle, right? So when someone grabs a doorknob or a door handle, it might be, if you don't have a ton of hand strength, difficult for you to turn that and utilize it. If you put a little of this grip tape on there, it helps them, like their hand can get a better hold on it and they can open that easier. Same thing with like water faucets and anything that you're having them use, like you can put that on there. You can also put it on there, like if you're using different tools. So say you're using a hammer for, a shop project in a project workshop, you can put this on the handle of the hammer and allows them to be able to hold it better in their hand without it slipping out, because it just has that rougher texture that automatically like, sticks to your hand a little bit more than that smooth handle that might be on there. So think broadly, like I said, could be on pencils, hammers, door handles, water faucets, anything you can think of that might be beneficial for someone to be able to better grip. So that's kind of the purpose of that. Also can be used on walking surfaces. So a lot of times people like might put this on the step of their campers because when they're like stepping on there, it allows their feet to like get a grip on something. So think about like steps, walkways, wherever that is, it just allows their feet to be able to like have something to grip and not slide quite so much. Another like simple thing that people may have already at their home and that's pretty accessible is like shelf liner paper. So with this, it's just the stuff that you would put like in your kitchen cabinets or in your drawers right at home. And the reason this is useful is you can cut a sheet of this that's like big enough to fit in front of someone's surface where they're working. And then they can use that to keep their like papers and materials in place, because rather than having that slippery tabletop or whatever they're working on, this will allow, like I said, their paper or whatever to just stick in place a little bit more, which is especially useful if someone has a little bit of difficulty in like being able to control their materials, like being able to keep their sheet of paper where it is and write at the same time, right? So it's a great tool to cut a sheet, put it in front of someone where they're working and their stuff will stick to a little bit. Same is true for like, for example, like a ruler. If you're having someone draw a straight line or you're going to measure, you could put shelf liner paper on the back or that grip tape. And that again, just allows things to stay where we want them to stay and not slide around so much. Because some of that, like if you think about, if you don't have a disability, it can be difficult already to keep your materials in place, to not have a ruler slipping around, whatever it might be. Now think about how multiplied that is for someone who has some fine motor difficulties. So if we can just do some of these really easy things to help support them a little bit better, it's going to be beneficial to everybody that's participating in those activities. So those are some example of fine motor supports. And again, just like we talked about our fidgets, there's lots of other ones. These are just the ones that we've chosen to put in the kit here in Minnesota. Does anyone have any others that they would add to this list that they've potentially utilized personally or professionally? Okay. Then we're going to talk about some of those visual focus and understanding supports. With these, again, a lot of these things are things that you might already have access to, but you just maybe haven't thought about using them in these ways. So for example, highlighters, with highlighters, they can serve us in lots of ways when working with someone with a disability. If we are handing out, for example, instructions that are like going to be do this, do this, do this, right? We can highlight the key words or the key things that they need to do. And it allows them to just focus really on those highlighted pieces and ignore all of the other text that might be on the page. The same is true if we're expecting someone to maybe read something and answer some questions. Highlight those key things they need to read, the key questions or pieces of question that they need to answer. Here in Minnesota, we do like for our state fair interviews, and some counties do it too for their livestock programs. We have kids like read something and then answer questions. And that's like their first like step of livestock interview at the state fair. And if you do well in that, then you proceed to like an in-person interview, and then they pick winners from that. So in that type of situation, you know, you'd want to like highlight the key pieces that of the reading for someone, and then really highlight those key parts of the question that they need to answer. And then I think as staff, you know, whenever we're making accommodations, we need to also be prepared for those questions about equability, right? Like, is it equitable to highlight and help someone maybe make the reading and question answering easier for them? Or does that put them at an unfair advantage over their peers? You know, so as staff, we need to kind of be prepared to answer that question sometimes and answer it in a way that helps people understand that us highlighting things is helping to level the playing field for those young people, because they already are at a disadvantage because they may not have the reading skills, or the understanding skills to be able to do it without those extra support. So keep that in the back of your mind too, because sometimes people will ask about that, or maybe contact you because they don't think that that's fair that they have those things. Some other some other visual and support things that are kind of cool. Again, this is when I wish that you could actually like touch and feel. So multi-sensory ruled paper. It looks like, you can't see real great, but it's just line paper, right? Is what it looks like. But if you actually feel it, all of the lines in there are raised up higher than the actual paper. So when someone is writing, like as they're writing, they can feel their pencil go over the lines. And they can also feel like with their other hand that they're maybe using to hold the paper. And that allows them to be able to stay in the lines a little bit better and make their written text a little more readable. Because that can be a challenge for people with and without disabilities. I mean, my oldest son with autism, like his writing, I feel like has gotten worse with age. It is pretty much illegible, but paper like this helps to make that a little bit easier for him because he knows where he needs to write. He can feel his pencil going over the lines. And again, he can feel with the other hand, like where the lines are as he's doing that. So again, just another tool, you know, if you're handing out paper for people to write on, have a notebook of this with so that you can pull off a sheet, hand it to someone if it's going to be beneficial for them to use for writing. Again, also useful for someone who is just developing those writing skills, right? And still kind of like struggling with being able to do that in a legible way. One of my favorite things in this kit, and one of the things that our 4-H staff and volunteers have liked the best, is this chime. So this is an alternative to like you yelling at a program to get everybody's attention, you tapping a gavel or someone tapping a gavel really loud and a bunch of times at a meeting to get everybody's attention because they're talking. Many times also like at a camp situation, we might have like this kind of like call that we yell and everybody's supposed to echo back, right? And then we know that they heard us kind of thing. This really takes out that like loud sensory in your face part of that. So like to get some of the attention, you simply tap the chime, right? And it's a lot easier for someone to be able to like take in sensory than, again, that really loud like banging a gavel, that yelling. And like you as a staff person or as a volunteer too, it's a lot more pleasant to like tap a gavel than try to yell or tap a chime than it is to yell over your whole group and hope that they hear you. So that's one of the favorite ones that a lot of our staff and volunteers have here in Minnesota, just because it's something that like they find super useful and makes their life a lot easier. Another one of their favorites is this timer, and I'm going to show you the one that's in your kits, but I'm also going to show you a big version because the small one's a little bit hard to see. So this timer really just looks like a clock. It's fairly decent size, so it's easy to like take with you to programming. This is the big version. This is our version from the at home. And with this, the cool thing is that it allows a young person or anyone with a disability to like visually understand time, because time can be a super complicated concept. And if I find my little spinner is in there, there it is. Can be a super complicated concept to understand because it's really abstract, right? It's not like super concrete. So if we say, oh, we have 15 minutes left, what does that mean? So by using this timer, like you set the timer to whatever time you want it to be. And then as the time goes, like it moves, right? So people can visually see this is how much time we have left. And it's good because it allows someone like to be able to prepare for transition if you're going to transition to a different activity when that time is up. It also allows someone to kind of gauge how much time they have to complete something so they don't feel quite as much anxiety or stress because they don't know when 15 minutes is up, right? They don't know when that time is coming. So it's a great tool to have in that regard too, because then people can see the time go down. They can get a feel for where they are in the session or learning activity. And they don't have to continually either ask you like, how much time do I have left? How much time do I have left? Right? Like they can see how much time it is. They can see that time elapsing. And it, like I said, it just allows them to mentally prepare themselves to transition to whatever the next thing is that's coming. And then one of the other things that people really appreciate too is using visual schedules. And a visual schedule, I have a big one so you can see here. It's also on the screen so you can see it there too. But with a visual schedule, it's essentially like a to-do list, right? It's a to-do list of what you're going to do during the day. And one of the reasons our staff love it, especially like for a day camp or an after-school program, is when you walk in the room, and most of you, if you teach this type of programming, you can probably relate to this. When you walk in the room, before you even get a chance to like take your materials out and set them up for your session, you've probably been asked 50 times, what are we doing today? Right? What are we doing today? What are we doing today? And it's like, okay, like, hold on, right? Like, we'll get there. Or you're answering that question 50 times. So by having this visual, like the first thing you do when you get there is you post this on the wall. And then people can see exactly what you're going to do that day. So they don't have to ask you over and over and over what you're doing. And like, they can see it themselves. You can get your materials ready. And it really reduces that. And our staff and volunteers appreciate that because like I said, there's just that overwhelmingness of what are we doing? What are we doing? Well, you can just reference them. And as they also like get in that routine and habit of knowing we're just going to have that schedule on the wall, like they can come in, they can look at that schedule. And you don't need to, like I said, again, continue to answer that question. And the cool part with the visual schedules that are in there is there's the first then next, and there's just one that's like 1 through 5. So the first then next, I think we talked a little bit about this last time, but a first then next schedule, you can see that there's 3 boxes on there. There's a first, a then, and then the next. And with this, it allows someone to see what the 3 tasks are they're going to complete. And it's important to note, like, different people are gonna be at different levels. So some people you might just use 2 of these 2 boxes. Some of them it might be all 3, whatever their level is. And typically the thing that's in the next is like the desirable thing, the thing that can help them get through the stuff they don't want to do so that they can stick with you long enough to get to the thing they want to do. So like for me, when you think about that, and we all probably do this like mentally in our heads throughout the course of the day. So for me, it might be like my first things in the morning is first, I'm going to answer emails. Then I'm going to check and answer my voicemails. And next I can go get another cup of hot chocolate, right? Like that motivator. Or a lot of us might have like, okay, if I do these things, then I maybe can get like a piece of chocolate or whatever it might be, right? Same concept for people who are utilizing this. So in our programs, it might be like, first we're going to do the lesson activity. Then we're going to do like some type of hands-on project. And next we're going to go play a game, right? Because if that game is the motivator for someone, then by having that as the reward kind of hanging out there, they can get through the things they may not want to do as much and know that they're going to get to do the things soon that they want to do. One of the key pieces with that is like knowing your 4-Hers well enough to know like what should be in that next box, what's that motivator, right? Because if you put something in that next box that you think is the fun thing, but they don't, it really isn't going to serve that same purpose of getting them through the less desirable to do the fun, because your idea of fun and theirs might not always be the same, right? So you have to know that audience so you can figure out what that is. And then with that, you can either, and with both schedules, same kind of concept, you have to kind of know what the ability is of those in the room. So do you need to use like actual pictures, right? Do you need to have a picture of the actual project you're going to make? the person who's going to be speaking, right? Like youth playing a game. Or can you get away with like the pictures on this example? This is called PECS, which are Picture Exchange Communication System. They're a pretty standard system that people who are nonverbal or have limited verbal communication skills use. So there's pictures that they are familiar with. For some people, those are going to be great. For some people, you might also be able to just write it. Like you might be able to write like, we're going to do a lesson activity, we're going to do a project, and then we're going to do a game, right? You might be able to just write the words. So think about that. And some of you can just draw stick pictures and they're cool with that. So you have to kind of read your group a little bit and what their needs are, and what they're able to comprehend as a part of that. So that's how you use that first, then next. The today's schedule, similar concept. The one difference with that is like you can see next to the numbers, you have the picture, and there's a smaller box, and that smaller box can be used in a few ways. Like I always recommend that you laminate these, because then you can either like Velcro pictures on, like whiteboard draw or write things. But what you do with this one is you take the picture and you move it from the bigger box to the smaller box, or you can check it off. You can put a sticker in each one, some way for someone to indicate, yes, we did that, and we're going to move on to the next thing on our list. And again, this is something that most of us probably do throughout the day. I know I have a calendar where I write, like, here's the tasks I want to complete today, right? Here's the schedule of maybe meetings I have throughout the course of the day. And it allows, by having that to-do list, that schedule, like it automatically takes out some of the anxiety for us, right? So think about, that's the same concept with our young people when we use these schedules. It allows them to know what's coming, reduces that anxiety. And we also, like I said, again, we might do that mentally too. So we're doing that throughout the course of the day. We're just not thinking about it as a support tool for young people in our programs. So you would list here, like I said, again, real pictures, these PECS pictures, writing, stick figures, whatever is to the capacity of your program participants, you'd put those there. And again, as many or as few, like you might be able to do all 5 of these and list them out for people. But you might also only be able to do 3 or 2. It really depends on what the capacity of your program participants are. And then, like I said, you mark, move the pictures, put stickers, whatever you want to do, just so that they can see we completed this, we're moving on to the next thing. Again, removes that anxiety and reduces that constant questioning of what are we going to do? Well, they can see what we're going to do, right? One thing that you'll notice on here is I don't have any times on any of these, and that's intentional, because times can be good or bad. Some people, times are good because they know, like, here's the time we're going to do these things, right? And they can kind of track that and know I have this amount of time, like we're going to move on to this if I don't like this. Other people, times can get so like ingrained in their head that they have a hard time when you don't exactly follow the time, right? So if you're running a little late on something, or you got done with it early, that can create a lot of anxiety. And it also can mean that then I'm going to reference the clock every 3 seconds to see what time it is. So that way I know whether or not like we're on schedule. So like I said, so times can be good or bad. So again, judge that for what you think is right for your program. But I typically don't do any times on things. So that's kind of some of the pieces there. Other tools that any of you have utilized with either personally or professional that have been beneficial to kind of support that visual focus and understanding of young people? I'm seeing some chats or some comments in there too. Yeah, Leanne, like I said, it is pretty cool. So the paper is probably something that most of you have never seen, that like multi-lined ruled paper, because it's, you know, something that like most people wouldn't utilize, right? So you probably haven't seen it, but it is pretty cool. And like I said, I wish you could feel it, because it is really neat, because you can feel those lines and it helps you to be able to stay that in there. And I kind of wish you had something like that growing up. Yeah, like I feel like that would make it much easier for everyone to learn writing if you had paper like that. Dustin's got a comment in there about he wants one of those visual timers. Yeah, they're cool. And you can buy them for like $10 on Amazon. Like they don't need to be super expensive. Like there's ones that are $10 and there's ones that are hundreds of dollars, right? So you can pick and choose whatever you feel is the right timer for you. Lots of different sizes, you know, like I said, there's the smaller ones that I have in your kits. There's ones that are even smaller. There's ones that are big, like I have, that's like The one I show you, the big one, is like probably like 10 by 10. So it's pretty big. So there's lots of different ones. There's also ones, most of them you can like choose whether or not they make noise, which again, like if you have people with sensory difficulties, you might not want like an alarm going off in your program. So just be aware of that. Like usually on the back of them, they'll have a button of like sound on or off. So just, be aware of whether or not you want to have them, but they are really cool. The Pomodoro method, I'm not sure what that is. So I don't know, Dustin, if you want to share a little bit more about that.
Sure. Yeah. The Pomodoro method is like where you take, so for every 25 minutes of work, it's like a 5-minute break, or like, I don't want to say it's the work and reward kind of idea, but it'll kind of start, I think, in Italy. It's like a kitchen timer. So you'll see some of them that look like a tomato because Pomodoro is like a tomato.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just kind of like the idea of you have your focus, but then you have that slight mental rest. And then you go
Mm-hmm.
back and do it as opposed to trying to slog through without taking any breaks or whatever and whatnot. And
Mm-hmm.
so, yeah. But anyway, that's just one of the things. I was going to say also where you talked about like the focus and understanding supports. As much as I love using tech and everything else, they have found that many students benefit from being able to write physically, hold a pen, and where they have
Mm-hmm.
more of an actual physical interaction. You have some students do the typing, or you have tablets, and it's still somewhat tactile. But by allowing students to have like those constant, like a constant pen in your hand, where it's not the fidget aspect, but yet they can draw, they can take notes. And that's one thing that I think we've come a long way in terms of education, is like the idea of sketchnoting, and things, before it was just like a lot of diagrams. And it depends on, I always say, who taught you how to take notes? I know some people where their note taking skills equals writing down everything that is said. And
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to, when I like to do it, my classroom board would look either like kind of a waterfall, like a flow chart, or it would look almost like a spider web with lines and circles. My kids would call it the diary of a madman, but like especially like with novels, you could branch off them from characters and themes and all
Mm-hmm.
kinds of different things. And it definitely helps the visual learners or kids who need a little bit more than just rote memorization, whatever, whatnot, to kind of grasp the material a little bit better. But anyhow.
Yeah, yeah, and like I said, there's something about like holding something in your hand, right? And I think there's many reasons for that. You think about how many times when we're on a computer, are we distracted by things that have nothing to do with what we're supposed to be focusing on, right? Like, oh, I'm just going to check my email in this meeting, or I'm going to do whatever, right? So automatically that provides some different distractors than if you have a paper and pencil in your hand. So I think that's something to be aware of. Again, like you said, like there's something to be said for actually writing something versus typing it. I feel like we have to think a little more intentionally when we're writing something than when we're just typing. I think we can do that many times just a little more simply and not even with thinking what we're doing. So yeah, for sure. And when you talk about that method of having like designated work time or like focus time, and then having time to be able to like break it up and do some different things that get you moving, right? I think that's a really key piece of any time that we are organizing a program. When we're, especially something that is going to be a day or half day or whatever that might be, we want to make sure that we are allowing time for kids to like do engaged learning, but also time for movement breaks, right? Because that is a really important piece, because even as adults, like if we have to sit in front of a computer all day long and like can't get up and like walk around the office or quick go like chat with someone or go have a quick snack break or go make another cup of coffee or whatever, right? It can be really super hard to focus for that intense amount of time. And we hopefully as adults have even more developed coping skills and skills and being able to sit for longer times than young people do in our programs. So we have to really just be really aware of that and know that, yes, like plan your learning, plan your things if people are going to be in a chair, but then get up and move, right? Do some brain breaks, do some physical activity type of things so people are moving and kind of getting that transition time too. All right, with that kind of talks through what's in the kits, but I wanted to leave a little bit of time for us too, for you to be able to ask some questions if there's things that you wanted to know a little bit more about what I shared, or even just share if there is another great tool that you've utilized that maybe we haven't talked about yet that you feel like would benefit everybody else on our call this morning. So this is kind of that time open to all of you to add a little bit to the conversation. And I would also say, Leanne, it might be time for you to share, maybe you're going to just at your spring training too, of like what that plan is for making these accommodation kits available for people. So that they kind of know like, how do we get one of these in hand to utilize or look at if we want to do that.
Yeah, for sure. So I got enough from Darcy to go basically 3 across the top of our state and then 3 across the bottom of our state. And then I don't know, Darcy, did you want, I don't mean to put you on the spot here. I didn't know if like a county individually wanted to purchase one. Is that an option? Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
we could work on that. And I'll also share with you too, like in the follow-up email, a link to like all of the stuff I ordered.
Okay.
Pretty much all of it you can order on Amazon. You can order other places too. You know, but most of it, like I said, it's all available on Amazon. Some things are more expensive or cheaper on Amazon than you might find other places depending on the deal. I mean, I found when I created the ones from Minnesota, like early fall, like NASCO had the tabletop mounted scissors. Like, I don't know if they were clearancing them out or what they were doing, but they were like a third of the cost, right, as of Amazon. Now they're like more expensive than Amazon, right?
Yeah,
So it depends. So, but
for
I
sure.
will share with you a link to all of them that are ordered. Again, like you don't have to order the one that I necessarily ordered, right? Because there's lots of options, or you can just go on like Amazon and search pencil grips, right? And there's tons of them, right? So yeah, so there's lots of cool things. I'll share it with that. So if there's things that you're like, well, I heard about these 5 things that sound like they would be great to have for my program, order those things, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, if you want help creating a kit, absolutely willing to do that too. Just let me know. I think when we created them, they were because our kits also have this kind of this cool bag.
Mhm.
Could do something else on your own too, but we put them in this really nice like big canvas tote intentionally. We had a lot of conversation as I was developing these with the other people that were part of the team to ask like, okay, here's the stuff I want to put in here, what makes sense. And I really advocated for like a nice tote that people could take with, because we wanted it something that you're easily going to take program to program, right, site to site. And we talked about like, is that a tote box? Maybe not, right? It maybe isn't as easy to carry when you've got your hands full of other things. You know, is it like what does that look like? And we decided on this nice big canvas tote, because that way if you're going to a meeting, you could throw your other stuff in there for your meeting, right? And then you can just take it and go throw it over your shoulder. I can tell you I can carry about 8 of these at a time. So they're you know, they're not like super heavy, but they're also a nice bag that allows you to be able to like take them with you really easily as you go.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
yes, like I said, let me know too. Happy to help with those things. So.
perfect. Thanks, Darcy. I think they
Yeah,
cost. Oh yeah, go
yeah.
ahead.
And Amber's got a question in the chat too. Is that grip tape removable? Like after use? Yes. It's kind of sticky, but it's not like super sticky. So you can pull it off pretty easily off of items that you're putting it on. Good question.
I love Bethany's comment. I had multiple professors that did that kind of the same thing. Sometimes he did that on purpose just to get our attention relative to something. I think the total cost of everything in the content in the tote is there around like 2 something for
Yeah.
I thought that's relatively inexpensive for how much you actually get. And because of what I've been learning from Darcy, and it helped me, anybody across our state, is I've tried to implement some of this stuff in other things that we do. So for example, our trunks, our scrapbooking trunk, I had Liz, when we got it back and are restocking it, I had her order all of these different scissors and stuff to add to that. And so if you guys think of a way that we can at the state level add something to a trunk that helps meet some of these needs, definitely let us know.
Yeah, Dustin's got a comment too about that attention engagement span. I think that's a really key piece, right? We talked about, and we'll talk about next time too, next week a little bit. We talk about some of those positive behavior supports. We'll talk about the importance of providing those like breaks, right? Those chances to just move, get up, refocus on things. Cause yeah, like it's high, low, high, right? You kind of in that middle, you get that slump. A lot of times we talk about that, like the after lunch slump, right? Cause it's kind of that midday and we feed ourselves and then it's like, right. Like, am I going to stay awake for all of this stuff? So yeah, it's, again, it's start with that interesting part, followed by maybe the less interesting and then end with those interesting things, right? Kind of like even how we write papers, when we talk about like, what's that process you want to write with, right? Like those really important things you need to know. The middle, maybe not quite as important, and then end it strong, right? Like, so that you kind of punch them in the face of those things they really need to know. Or again, keep it interactive, keep it engaging, right? Which is hopefully what we're doing. And that's where it's so important to have those movement breaks, have those chances for kids to get up, refocus a little bit so they can come back and be ready to learn. Like I said, we'll talk a little bit about some examples of those next week too.
I was going to say, as a teacher still in a state of recovery, I will confess one of my sins is that I started out and I would begin with reviewing the homework from last night. Yeah, I did that for a few months and then I was like that. It's like you have your golden period, that first like initial, like out of a 50-minute class, that first 15 minutes, and you're going to spend it reviewing the homework. It still needs to be kind of done. I taught a foreign language, but that is not where, that's where all the energy's at. And then you're going to throw that in. You can probably start up with something else, pivot back to that, and then go on. Otherwise, it's like, okay, now that we're done with that, let's move on to, and everyone is like, like a rocket booster, they already burnt off half of their fuel. Yeah, it's hard.
Yes, Go Noodle. That's when we're going to actually talk specifically about next week. It's a great way to provide a lot of those sensory breaks. It's a pretty common thing a lot of special education departments use, but essentially Go Noodle, it provides, there's a number of like different types of, I would say, like almost like categories. There's activities that help with breathing and like doing some of those calming breathing activities. There's some that like increase energy in a group. There's some that are designed to like reduce the energy in a group so you can focus. There's some that are just like fun, but with even like what we might think of as like camp songs, right? They do some of those. So wide variety of different brain breaks, and essentially like they're just opportunity to get up, have some movement, be able to like be ready to refocus and be able to do what you need to do in your coming up rest of your session. So we'll talk a little bit more about them, but if you Google Go Noodle, they've got a website, or even if you're on YouTube and you put in Go Noodle, you'll see a bunch that come. They're super fun, super fun. I think really like audience they're probably really designed for is elementary school, but there's a lot of them that would be applicable for middle school, high school, and even as like an adult, there's a lot that I think are super, super fun. So check them out. Like when my kids were little, there's one that was Kitty High Five, which I feel like we listened to 1 million times in our household. Because some of them are just like also just hilarious, right? Like that's the purpose of them, is like to get people laughing, to get them like ready to go. So there's something that I said, a lot of elementary school teachers use these many times. A lot of special education teachers use them too, and we'll explore them a little bit more next week too, because they're a great movement, sensory, refocus kind of break for students. Any other ideas or questions people want to share? Okay, if not, then we're kind of at that time to get ready to wrap up. So we want to reflect and evaluate a little bit on how things were. So I would love for you to unmute and share or write in the chat. One, how do you see using some of these accommodation supplies? And then what items do you think are going to be most useful for you in whatever type of 4-H program that you do? And then if you also can either use the QR code or and I can put the link in the chat as well for you. If you can do either one of those, that would be super helpful. Because that gives me a little bit of feedback too about what you found most useful, what things you still need, and we can continue to, again, just make sure that each one of these sessions continues to be high quality for all of you as you're doing your work there in North Dakota. So, okay, so the link is in the chat too for that eval. like I said, if you can, like I said, throw in the chat those kind of 2 answers to those questions, or unmute if you're comfortable with that. And then if you can do the eval, otherwise we will hopefully see all of you again next week. We'll be looking at positive behavior intervention strategies, which are really things that we can proactively put in place for young people to be successful within our programs. And they're all pretty simple strategies that we can utilize that really just allow us to hopefully reduce some of the potential negative behaviors, and provide a more positive way for people to interact with each other in our settings.
Thank
All
you
right,
so
otherwise
much,
I will
Darcy.
stay on. Yeah, I'll stay on as long as people are on and answer any questions or talk through, you know, individual situations if you want to do that. Otherwise, like I said, hopefully we'll see y'all next week.
Oh, she just left. I was like, oh, Lynette was gonna share a scenario from this weekend, but I was like, why don't you take notes and share it next time if you want to get her courage up. I
Yeah.
am
Yeah.
I'm gonna share with you some of the certificates that Ada created, just to see what
Okay.
you think. I think it'd be cool if there were signatures on them, but totally up to you. So
Yeah,
I'll
we
share
can
those
do
with
that.
you. Cool.
Yeah.
And then I'll share with
Perfect.
you some emails that were on today, so you can share out
Yeah,
that follow-up.
for sure. I will do that. I appreciate that. And hopefully today was valuable for everyone. And then we will talk about behavior stuff next week. And it's crazy to think we're like over halfway through these already.
I
I
know.
mean, when like we originally planned it felt so far out, right? Like it is when we plan everything else. And now it's like, what? We're halfway out. And then next week will be like 4 of the 5 sessions already. It's kind of crazy that way. But hopefully they've been valuable for people.
They have, they very much have. And I have to say that I totally have to brag on you, because at my 4-H leadership meeting in February that Jennifer was at as well, we were talking about equity, and like a lot of people didn't understand that youth with different disabilities also can fall under equity. They were just thinking of the physical stuff. And so I had mentioned
Yes.
that, and then I was like, I wanted to be like, you need to have a series with Darcy. So it was really cool because I learned all that from you. So very cool.
Yeah, and a lot of times we don't, right? We think about that equity, that diversity being skin color, that ethnic background, right? Some of those pieces, some of those things that are really visible, right? And sometimes disability can be visible, but many times it's not. So we often don't think about that. And it's an important part of diversity to think about, because all of us have young people in our community that have a disability. Some of us that are maybe in a more rural community might not feel like we have a lot of racial diversity, right? Like we might feel like, well, is that worth me spending a whole lot of energy on? Maybe not, right? But we all have disability in our community, whether or not we recognize it or program specifically for it.
Well, and there was
So,
actually
awesome.
quite a bit of research out there that goes a little bit further too, and talks about racial equity within disability. Like Native American, African American versus white people that are disabled still having. It was really cool. So I'm very grateful for all you're teaching me.
Well, good. And yeah, it's fascinating to look at the research and look at how they have that intersectionality, right? Because there's some things where we might think like that disability hits all populations the same way. Not necessarily, right? And there's certain types of disabilities that are more popular in different racial backgrounds. And part of it is like there's a lot of people we know like never are diagnosed with disability, right? Because there might be some cultural stigma in doing that, right? So like they don't pursue that diagnosis because they feel differently about disability than other groups might. So yeah, there's a lot of intersectionality that's just so interesting to look at. So
It's really cool. Well, thank you so much for today. I really appreciate everything.
Sounds good. And then we will see you next week. Take care,
Yes.
Leanne.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.